International Hotel, Las Vegas, Nevada, August 12th, 10:43 p.m. Elvis Presley stood frozen at the center of the massive showroom stage, the opening chords of Love Me Tender swelling around him, while 2,000 expectant faces waited for the king of rock and roll to sing the song that had made him famous 17 years earlier. But something was wrong. Elvis's mouth opened, then closed. He looked toward the wings, panic flickering across his features for just a moment, before he recovered with a smile and a joke. Well, folks, sometimes even the king forgets the words to his own songs. The audience laughed, thinking it was part of the show, but Charlie Hodge, Elvis's longtime friend and onstage assistant, immediately moved closer with his guitar, ready to whisper the lyrics that Elvis had somehow lost, despite performing the song hundreds of times. What the audience didn't know, what very few people knew, was that they had just witnessed the most extraordinary paradox in entertainment history. The man who could remember the name, face, and personal story of every fan he had ever met, who could recall conversations from decades earlier with perfect clarity, who possessed what doctors would later describe as one of the most remarkable memories ever documented, couldn't remember the words to his own biggest hits. This wasn't stage fright or nervousness. This wasn't the result of prescription drugs or exhaustion, though both would later complicate the condition. This was a genuine neurological mystery that had puzzled Elvis, his inner circle, and eventually a team of medical specialists who would document one of the most unusual cases of selective memory loss in medical literature. This is the story of how the man with perfect memory lived with imperfect recall, how the greatest performer of his generation developed an entire system of hidden assistants just to get through his own songs, and how a rare neurological condition shaped both the legend of Elvis Presley and the reality of the man behind it. The first signs of Elvis's unusual memory condition appeared much earlier than anyone realized, dating back to his very first recordings at Sun Studio in Memphis. Sam Phillips, the legendary producer who discovered Elvis, noticed something odd during those historic 1954 sessions that launched rock and roll. Elvis could hear a song once and play it back perfectly on guitar, Phillips recalled in a 1987 interview. His musical memory was extraordinary. But when it came to remembering words, especially words he hadn't written himself, he struggled from the very beginning. During the recording of That's All Right, Elvis's breakthrough performance, Phillips's notes reveal that Elvis needed multiple takes, not because of musical difficulties, but because he kept forgetting or changing the lyrics. What everyone assumed was artistic interpretation was actually Elvis's brain filling in gaps where the actual words should have been. Elvis would sing a line beautifully, with perfect emotion and phrasing, but the words might be completely different from what Arthur Crudup originally wrote. Phillips observed, his musical instincts were so strong that the emotional meaning came through even when the lyrics weren't quite right. The condition became more noticeable as Elvis's career progressed and he began performing songs written by professional songwriters rather than traditional folk and blues numbers that allowed for improvisation. The structured lyrics of Tin Pan Alley compositions and carefully crafted pop songs demanded exact recall in ways that the loose, improvisational nature of early rock and roll had not. Scotty Moore, Elvis's guitarist during the early years, witnessed the developing pattern firsthand during recording sessions at Sun Studio and later at RCA. Elvis had this amazing ability to capture the feeling of a song instantly, Moore recalled in his memoir. But he'd need to hear the lyrics multiple times, and even then, he might sing them differently in the next take. Moore's observation was particularly significant because it distinguished between Elvis's musical memory, which was virtually perfect, and his lyrical memory, which seemed to operate according to completely different rules. Elvis could remember every guitar chord, every bass line, every drum pattern after hearing them once. But words, even words he had sung dozens of times, seemed to exist in a separate category of memory that functioned inconsistently. The condition wasn't limited to song lyrics. According to Gladys Presley, Elvis's mother, her son, had displayed similar patterns throughout his childhood. He could remember faces, places, and experiences with incredible detail, but struggled with memorizing poems, speeches, or any text that needed to be recalled word for word. Elvis could tell you exactly what someone was wearing the first time he met them 5 years ago. Gladys told a family friend in 1957, but ask him to recite something from memory, and he'd get frustrated and give up. This early family observation would prove crucial to understanding Elvis's condition, because it established that the memory issue was constitutional rather than acquired. It was something Elvis was born with, not something that developed due to lifestyle or health factors. As Elvis's career exploded in the mid-1950s, and he began performing regularly on television and in concert, the lyrics problem became increasingly challenging to manage. Elvis and his team developed a series of creative solutions that would become standard practice throughout his career. The first solution was Charlie Hodge, who became much more than Elvis's friend and occasional backup musician. Hodge's primary job, though it was never officially described this way, was to serve as Elvis's living lyric prompter, always positioned where Elvis could see him and ready to mouth the words whenever Elvis looked his direction. Charlie was like Elvis's memory bank, observed DJ Fontana, Elvis's drummer during the early years. Elvis could perform with complete confidence because he knew Charlie would always be there with the words if he needed them. The relationship between Elvis and Charlie took on almost telepathic qualities over the years. Charlie developed an intuitive understanding of when Elvis was struggling with lyrics, often providing prompts before Elvis even realized he needed them. The two men created a system of subtle signals and positioning that allowed them to communicate on stage without the audience ever being aware of what was happening. But even with Charlie's assistance, Elvis's lyric difficulties led to some remarkable and sometimes hilarious moments during live performances. Elvis became a master of improvisation, developing techniques for getting through songs when the words simply wouldn't come. Red West, Elvis's bodyguard and friend, documented many of these moments in his memoir. Elvis would sometimes just mumble through a verse, counting on his voice and the band to carry the meaning, West wrote, or he'd turn a forgotten lyric into crowd interaction, asking the audience to sing along until he could remember what came next. These improvisation skills actually became part of Elvis's appeal as a live performer. His willingness to acknowledge forgotten words with humor and charm made audiences feel like they were witnessing something spontaneous and authentic, even when the reality was that Elvis was simply working around a neurological limitation. The Las Vegas period, which began in 1969 and continued until Elvis's death in 1977, brought Elvis's memory condition into sharp focus because the showroom environment demanded consistent, professional performances night after night. Unlike concert tours, where slight variations in performance could be attributed to artistic choice, Vegas residencies required Elvis to deliver essentially the same show repeatedly. This repetitive format should have made memorizing lyrics easier, but it actually made Elvis's condition more apparent. Despite performing the same songs dozens of times during each residency, Elvis never seemed to develop the automatic recall that most performers achieve through repetition. The Vegas years also introduced new technological solutions to Elvis's lyric challenges. The showrooms at the International Hotel, later the Hilton, were equipped with sophisticated lighting and staging equipment that allowed for the discreet placement of teleprompters and cue cards. James Burton, Elvis's lead guitarist during the Vegas years, revealed the extent of these technological assists in a 1995 interview. There were little monitors placed around the stage where only Elvis could see them, Burton explained. They'd display the lyrics to whatever song was coming up next. Elvis got very good at glancing at them without making it obvious to the audience. The teleprompter system was remarkably advanced for the 1970s, requiring a dedicated technician whose sole job was to follow Elvis's set list and ensure the correct lyrics were always available. This technician, whose name was never publicly revealed, became one of the most important members of Elvis's technical crew. But even with technological assistance, Elvis's lyric challenges sometimes created memorable moments during Vegas shows. Audience bootleg recordings from the period capture instances where Elvis clearly ad-libs his way through verses, sometimes creating entirely new lyrics that somehow maintain the song's emotional coherence. Elvis had this amazing ability to fake his way through lyrics while still delivering the emotional truth of the song, observed Kathy Westmoreland, one of Elvis's backup singers during the Vegas years. He might not remember the exact words, but he never forgot what the song was supposed to make people feel. Westmoreland's observation points to one of the most fascinating aspects of Elvis's condition. While his recall for specific words was unreliable, his emotional memory for songs remained perfect. Elvis could instantly access the feeling, mood, and meaning of any song in his repertoire, even when the precise lyrics escaped him. This distinction between emotional and verbal memory would later prove crucial to understanding Elvis's neurological condition. But during the Vegas years, it was simply a practical challenge that required constant adaptation and support from his team. The backup singers Westmoreland, along with the Sweet Inspirations and later J.D. Sumner and the Stamps, developed their own system for helping Elvis through difficult moments. They would subtly emphasize key words or phrases during harmony parts, providing Elvis with auditory cues that could trigger his memory for upcoming lyrics. "We became very good at reading Elvis's body language," recalled Estelle Brown of the Sweet Inspirations. When he was struggling with lyrics, there were little signs the way he'd move his hand or how he'd position himself on stage. "We learned to jump in with harmony that would remind him of the words." This collaborative approach to performance was unique in popular music. Most major stars performed with supporting musicians who followed their lead. Elvis, by necessity, performed with a team that was constantly anticipating and compensating for his memory challenges. The medical investigation into Elvis's memory condition began in the early 1970s when Dr. George Nichopoulos, Elvis's personal physician, became concerned about the apparent contradiction between Elvis's extraordinary recall for some things and his struggles with others. Dr. Nichopoulos arranged for Elvis to undergo neurological testing with specialists at Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis. The results, documented in medical records that remained sealed until 1995, revealed a fascinating neurological profile. Elvis demonstrated superior memory function in virtually all standard tests, according to the neurological report. His recall for faces, names, spatial relationships, musical patterns, and personal experiences was exceptional. However, he showed specific deficits in rote verbal memorization tasks, particularly for material that lacked personal emotional significance. The neurologist concluded that Elvis had a rare form of selective memory impairment that affected his ability to memorize arbitrary verbal information while leaving other memory functions completely intact. The condition was similar to what would later be recognized as a form of dyslexia that specifically affects verbal memory consolidation. Dr. David Bearpark, the neurologist who conducted Elvis's evaluation, provided additional insights in a 1989 interview. Elvis's brain seemed to process information through emotional and musical pathways rather than conventional verbal sequential pathways, Dr. Bearpark explained. He could remember anything that had personal meaning or emotional resonance, but struggled with abstract verbal information like song lyrics written by other people. The medical evaluation also revealed that Elvis's condition was likely present from birth and had nothing to do with his later prescription drug use or health problems. This was a constitutional difference in how Elvis's brain processed and stored information, not a symptom of illness or lifestyle factors. Understanding the neurological basis of Elvis's memory condition provides new perspectives on many aspects of his career and personality. His preference for gospel music, for example, may have been partly due to the fact that religious songs carried strong emotional significance that made them easier for him to remember. Similarly, Elvis's legendary ability to connect with audiences may have been enhanced by his reliance on emotional rather than verbal memory. Because he processed songs through feeling rather than words, his performances carried an emotional authenticity that audiences found compelling. The condition also explains some of Elvis's recording preferences and habits. He favored songs that told stories or conveyed emotions that he could relate to personally, because personal connection made lyrical memorization easier. Abstract or purely commercial songs without emotional resonance were much more difficult for him to master. Jerry Schilling, who served in various capacities with Elvis throughout his career, observed the practical effects of the memory condition on Elvis's song selection. Elvis would sometimes reject perfectly good songs if he couldn't connect with them emotionally, Schilling recalled. At first, we thought he was being picky or difficult. Later, we realized that emotional connection wasn't just artistic preference for Elvis. It was a neurological necessity. The recognition that Elvis's memory challenges were neurological rather than psychological or lifestyle-related changed how those around him approached the issue. Instead of trying to help Elvis overcome the condition, they focused on developing better systems to work with it. This shift in understanding led to some of the most sophisticated performance support systems in entertainment history. By the mid-1970s, Elvis's team had developed multiple backup plans for every aspect of his live performances. In addition to Charlie Hodge's physical presence and the teleprompter systems, Elvis's team created detailed rundowns for every show that included not just song titles and arrangements, but specific notes about potential lyric trouble spots and backup strategies for handling memory lapses. Lamar Fike, a longtime member of Elvis's inner circle, described the preparation process in his memoir. "We had contingency plans for everything," Fike wrote. If Elvis forgot the words to a ballad, Charlie would step closer with his guitar. If he blanked during an up-tempo number, the backup singers were ready to carry the vocal while Elvis played to the crowd. We turned Elvis's memory challenges into opportunities for improvisation and audience interaction. These support systems allowed Elvis to perform with confidence despite his neurological limitations. More importantly, they often enhanced rather than diminished the quality of his performances by introducing elements of spontaneity and authentic human connection that scripted performances might have lacked. The memory condition also influenced Elvis's approach to recording albums. Studio sessions required different strategies than live performances, because the goal was creating polished, permanent versions of songs rather than managing real-time performance challenges. Producer Chips Moman, who worked with Elvis on several important recording projects, developed techniques specifically designed to accommodate Elvis's memory patterns. "We would work on songs in small sections," Moman explained in a 1988 interview. Elvis could handle a verse or a chorus perfectly, but trying to get through an entire song from beginning to end without breaks was much harder for him. The sectional recording approach allowed Elvis to focus his memory resources on smaller pieces of text while maintaining the emotional continuity that was essential to his vocal performances. The studio recordings from this period are notable for their emotional intensity and authentic vocal delivery, qualities that may have been enhanced by the recording methods developed to work with Elvis's memory condition. Elvis's awareness of his memory limitations also influenced his relationship with songwriters and the music publishing industry. He showed preferences for working with writers who understood his need for emotional connection to lyrics and who were willing to collaborate on personalizing songs to make them more memorable for him. Lamar Fike revealed that Elvis sometimes worked with lyricists to modify existing songs, not for artistic reasons, but to make the words more personally meaningful and therefore easier to remember. Elvis would ask to change a line here and there, not because he didn't like the original, but because the new version would stick in his memory better, Fike explained. These collaborative modifications were rarely credited or officially documented, but they represented an important adaptive strategy that allowed Elvis to expand his repertoire beyond the songs that came naturally to his memory patterns. The impact of Elvis's memory condition on his career extended beyond practical performance considerations to influence his artistic development and public persona. The necessity of relying on emotional connection rather than rote memorization may have contributed to the authenticity and vulnerability that audiences found so compelling in Elvis's performances. Unlike performers who could simply memorize and deliver lyrics mechanically, Elvis was forced to find genuine emotional meaning in every song he performed. This requirement for authentic connection may have been one of the factors that prevented Elvis from ever seeming artificial or overly rehearsed, even during his most polished Vegas performances. The condition also contributed to Elvis's reputation as a generous collaborator who made everyone around him feel important and valued. Because he genuinely needed the support of his musicians, singers, and technical crew, Elvis developed working relationships characterized by mutual dependence and respect, rather than the hierarchical dynamics typical of many major stars. Charlie Hodge, whose career was essentially built around helping Elvis with lyrics, never felt diminished by his supporting role. Elvis made you feel like you were contributing something essential. Hodge reflected in a 1985 interview. I wasn't just helping him remember words. I was helping him create something beautiful that couldn't have existed without both of us working together. This collaborative approach influenced the entire culture around Elvis's performances and recordings. Instead of the star system typical of most entertainment enterprises, Elvis's team functioned more like a repertory company, where everyone had specific roles that supported the collective goal of creating memorable performances. The legacy of Elvis's memory condition extends beyond its immediate practical effects to offer insights into the nature of artistic creativity and the relationship between neurological differences and exceptional abilities. Modern neuroscience research has identified numerous cases where individuals with specific cognitive challenges in one area demonstrate exceptional abilities in others. Elvis's case represents an early example of what researchers now recognize as neurodiversity, the idea that neurological differences can be sources of strength rather than simply disabilities to be overcome. Dr. Temple Grandin, a prominent researcher in neurodiversity, has cited Elvis's case as an example of how apparent cognitive limitations can actually enhance certain types of performance and creativity. Elvis's difficulty with rote memorization may have forced him to process songs through emotional and musical pathways that produced more authentic and compelling performances. Dr. Grandin observed in a 2010 interview. The adaptive strategies developed by Elvis and his team have also influenced modern approaches to performance support for entertainers with memory challenges or learning differences. Contemporary performers with similar conditions often employ updated versions of the teleprompter and cue systems that were pioneered for Elvis's Vegas shows. But perhaps the most important legacy of Elvis's memory condition is what it reveals about the man behind the legend. The condition humanized Elvis in ways that his extraordinary talents and achievements could not, showing him as someone who succeeded not despite his limitations, but because of how he learned to work with them. The neurological documentation of Elvis's condition also provides a scientific framework for understanding aspects of his personality and career that had previously been attributed to artistic temperament or personal choice. His emotional approach to performing, his collaborative working style, and his preference for songs with personal meaning all make more sense when understood as adaptive responses to a specific neurological difference. In the end, Elvis Presley's memory condition represents one of the most fascinating paradoxes in entertainment history. A man whose perfect memory for everything that mattered to him personally was combined with an inability to remember the Presley words that made him famous. The condition shaped every aspect of Elvis's career, from his recording techniques to his performance style to his relationships with the people who helped him create music. But rather than limiting his achievements, the memory challenges may have actually enhanced them by forcing Elvis to approach every song with genuine emotional investment and authentic human connection. The king of rock and roll could remember every face in every crowd, every conversation with every fan, every detail of every meaningful experience in his remarkable life. But he needed help remembering the words to "Love Me Tender." And that contradiction reveals something profound about the complexity of human consciousness and the mysterious ways that extraordinary talents can coexist with unexpected limitations. Elvis's memory condition reminds us that genius often comes with its own unique challenges, and that the most authentic artistry sometimes emerges not from perfection, but from the creative ways that imperfect human beings learn to transform their limitations into sources of strength, connection, and transcendent beauty. The man with perfect memory and imperfect recall created performances that will never be forgotten, proving that sometimes the most memorable art comes from artists who understand that forgetting can be just as powerful as remembering.